The document was placed on the king's desk late that night. Inside, William had documented what he believed was a deliberate, systematic takeover, a quiet erosion of power that had been unfolding right under his father's nose. As Charles read through the report, the names, the dates, the alleged power plays began to paint a picture he could no longer ignore. He didn't shout. He didn't confront her. Instead, he picked up the phone and issued an order that would freeze his own wife out, sending shockwaves through the monarchy. But what was in that report that made him turn on the woman he waited decades to marry? Before we uncover what really happened, tell us in the comments, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding about this story? It began as a quiet act of defiance, concealed within the gilded walls of the palace. Prince William, known for his carefully measured public persona and dedication to duty, had spent months compiling a dossier. It wasn't about a foreign dignitary or a constitutional crisis. It was about his stepmother, Queen Camilla. According to palace insiders, the report meticulously documented a pattern of behavior, a systematic effort to undermine traditional royal structures, replace long-serving staff with loyalists, and carefully control the information reaching the king. William, driven by what he saw as a threat to the monarchy's integrity, presented his father with a document so damning it would force a king to confront the woman he had waited his entire life to marry. The dynamic between the king and his eldest son has always been complex, steeped in duty and expectation. But in recent months, a new tension had been simmering behind the scenes. Sources claimed that Queen Camilla herself had voiced concerns, urging Charles to rein in William's growing influence. She reportedly saw the Prince of Wales positioning himself as the driving force behind the throne, a role she believed belonged firmly to the king. This perception was only fueled by reports that William and Kate Middleton were constantly undermining the king and queen's authority, holding private meetings with courtiers and leaving them out of crucial decisions. The long-standing, delicate relationship between the heir and the queen consort, never truly warm, now appeared to be on a collision course. Camilla was said to be fuming over the way the Waleses had allegedly bulldozed their way into major royal decisions. The moment of reckoning arrived when Charles, alone in his study, began to read William's report. It wasn't simply a list of grievances. It was a reflection of a deeper fear. The king had spent his life waiting for the crown, and his wife had waited alongside him. Now, with his health a public concern and his reign still in its early years, the report painted a picture of an institution being quietly reshaped from within. Charles had promised Camilla a significant say in royal business. However, the evidence compiled by his son suggested that her actions were not about partnership, but about power. As he cross-referenced the report with his own private observations, the king came to a chilling realization. His wife had been acting independently, and the trust that formed the bedrock of their marriage had been fractured. But what happened next would send a shockwave through the palace and beyond, as the king decided not to confront his wife, but to make a silent, devastating statement that would change their relationship forever. William's report was not merely a collection of observations. It was a meticulously documented case file that painted a picture of a queen consort operating with alarming independence. The future king had noted a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond policy disagreements. He had allegedly documented instances where Camilla was bypassing traditional protocols and replacing long-serving staff with her own loyalists, actions he believed were designed to consolidate power before Charles's reign reached its inevitable conclusion. The Prince of Wales, deeply protective of his father's health, had reportedly become increasingly frustrated by what he saw as Camilla encouraging a dangerously punishing schedule for the cancer-stricken king. William was actively urging Charles to take a genuine step back and focus on his well-being, but each time he raised the concern, it triggered immediate tension because his stepmother was seen as the driving force pushing Charles forward into public engagements. This wasn't a son meddling in palace affairs. This was a future monarch watching his ailing father being pushed to the brink by a wife with a clear agenda. But perhaps the most incendiary evidence William presented in his report was not about politics, it was about legacy. Sources have claimed that the Prince of Wales has long struggled to fully accept his stepmother due to her controversial past with his father during his marriage to Princess Diana. The sentiment that the way Camilla betrayed their mother has not been forgotten by either of Diana's children resonates deeply, and William is believed to still harbor significant resentment. This long-simmering tension, expertly disguised by a diplomatic demeanor, had finally boiled over into an active investigation of her conduct. This investigation revealed a queen consort who appeared to be securing her future. She was reportedly fuming and accusing William of purposely undermining her and breaking protocol, especially after a bitter row over royal heirlooms where William stepped in to overrule a decision she had made. Sources close to Camilla claim she believed the Prince of Wales was already acting like the monarch before his time, and demanded that Charles have serious talks with his son to put him back in his place. But what Charles read next in William's report made him see his wife not as a victim of his son's ambition, but as a threat to everything he had built. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe so you never miss our next documentary. The king's response was not a dramatic confrontation in the throne room, nor a heated argument behind closed doors. Instead, Charles issued an order so subtle that it took palace staff days to fully comprehend its meaning. According to sources close to the royal household, the king quietly instructed his private secretaries to route all of Camilla's direct requests through the Lord Chamberlain's office, a bureaucratic maneuver that effectively stripped her of unilateral decision-making power. The queen consort, who had grown accustomed to direct access to her husband and the freedom to act on his behalf, was suddenly required to follow the same protocols as any other member of the royal household. It was a silent freeze-out, executed with the clinical precision of a monarch who had finally drawn a line in the sand. The tension that had simmered for months now erupted into open warfare behind palace walls. Camilla was reportedly furious at what she perceived as a betrayal, accusing William of purposely undermining her and breaking protocol. She had long believed that she and Charles were a united front, a partnership forged through decades of shared struggle and finally legitimized by the crown. But the report William had compiled painted a different picture, one of a queen consort operating with alarming independence. Insiders claimed Camilla believed the Prince of Wales was already acting like the monarch before his time, and had demanded that Charles have serious talks with his son to put him back in his place. Now, instead of reigning in William, Charles had aligned himself with his heir, leaving his wife isolated and powerless. The freeze-out extended far beyond palace protocol. In the weeks that followed, reports emerged that Charles and Camilla were leading increasingly separate lives. The king divided his time between Clarence House in London and his beloved Highgrove House in Gloucestershire, while Camilla retreated to her longtime sanctuary, Ray Mill House in Wiltshire, a property she had always maintained as her own. Though the couple continued to appear side by side at official engagements, sources say the reality behind closed doors was far more fractured. Some insiders even drew a parallel to the past, recalling how Charles's marriage to Princess Diana collapsed under the weight of his long-standing relationship with Camilla. The irony was not lost on those who remembered the pain of that era. Now, it was Camilla who felt the cold distance of a husband pulling away. If this story surprised you, share it with someone who would enjoy uncovering forgotten Hollywood stories. But the freeze-out was not simply about punishing Camilla. It was about a king asserting his authority in the twilight of his reign, making it clear that while his wife would always hold a place in his heart, she would never hold unchecked power in his court. Behind the scenes, Camilla's allies whispered that Charles had been manipulated by William, that the report was nothing more than a power play by a son eager to accelerate the succession. The queen consort was said to be ordering Charles to fix this, insisting he ensure the Waleses didn't get away with treating her like a second-class citizen. But the king refused to intervene, a silence that spoke louder than any rebuke. Meanwhile, the fallout from the palace freeze-out was already rippling through the wider royal family, exposing fractures that had long been papered over. The Prince of Wales, emboldened by his father's tacit support, was now stepping into the spotlight with renewed confidence, while Camilla found herself pushed to the margins of the institution she had spent decades trying to enter. And in the midst of this family drama, one question remained unanswered, a question that would further complicate the already fractured royal landscape. The king's silent freeze-out of Queen Camilla sent shockwaves through the palace, but it was only the beginning of a wider fracture that would test the very foundation of the monarchy. In the weeks that followed, the couple's carefully constructed public unity began to show visible cracks. Despite appearing side by side at official engagements, sources claimed the reality behind closed doors was far more fractured, with Charles and Camilla leading increasingly separate lives. The king divided his time between Clarence House in London and his beloved Highgrove House in Gloucestershire, while Camilla retreated to her longtime sanctuary, Ray Mill House in Wiltshire, a property she had insisted on keeping as her personal bolt hole even before their marriage. It was a domestic arrangement that had once been described as their secret to staying together, But now, palace insiders whispered, it had become a tool for maintaining distance rather than connection. The tension reached a boiling point when William reportedly had a frosty exchange with his father during the Trooping the Colour festivities, and the trigger was not Camilla this time, but Prince Harry. According to claims, the king's willingness to consider a reunion with his estranged younger son sparked new tensions with William, who wanted nothing to do with his brother following years of public attacks. Sources said the king's relationship with William is not in a good place and that the pair was at a very low ebb. William was reportedly furious that his father was even entertaining the idea of reconciliation with Harry, viewing it as a dangerous misjudgment that would destabilize the monarchy. The irony was not lost on palace observers. The same freeze-out that had isolated Camilla was now creating a rift between the king and his heir. Yet Camilla, ever the survivor, was not simply retreating in defeat. Behind the scenes, she was taking decisive steps to protect her position. She was reportedly ordering Charles to fix this, insisting he ensure the Waleses didn't get away with treating her like a second-class citizen. The battle lines had been drawn between the future king and the queen consort, with Charles caught in the middle. William, for his part, was said to be furious with Camilla over a series of bold and unauthorized moves regarding royal affairs and palace management. He was deeply protective of his father's health and allegedly frustrated by any scheduled changes orchestrated by Camilla's office that could potentially put the king's well-being at risk. The shift in palace dynamics was triggering fresh debates over authority, succession, and the balance of power within the House of Windsor. If you enjoyed this documentary, like the video and subscribe for more true celebrity stories every week. As the autumn of 2026 approached, the palace remained publicly silent about the internal turmoil. The official line was that the king and queen were united, that the family was working through challenges together. But those who moved through the corridors of power knew the truth. A cold war was being waged behind the gilded walls. Camilla retreated more frequently to Ray Mill, finding solace in the one place where she could slope around in dirty jeans and escape the restrictions of royal life. Charles, meanwhile, grew closer to William, recognizing that the future of the monarchy depended on the bond between father and son. The queen consort, who had waited decades for her crown, now found herself marginalized by the very institution she had fought so hard to enter. Some insiders even drew a parallel to the past, recalling how Charles's marriage to Princess Diana had collapsed under similar strains. The question remained, could this marriage survive the freeze-out, or had William's bombshell report changed everything forever? Only time would tell whether the king's silence was a temporary measure or the beginning of the end.